Ever wonder what's really going on behind the scenes of the modern internet? The instant recommendations, the live news feeds, that fraud alert that saves your bank account? Well, today we're getting into the story of Kafka, a technology that was literally built out of desperation but ended up running the entire digital world. Let's dive in. So, to really get why Kafka even exists, we have to rewind the clock a bit, back to the early days of the big data era. The internet was just exploding, and companies were collecting information on a scale that was totally unimaginable just a few years before. And to put a number on that, check this out. Back in 2011, Facebook was pulling in 6 terabytes of user activity data every single day. This wasn't just a small problem, it was a full-blown crisis. The tools everyone was using were starting to break under the sheer weight of it all. And that brings us to our story. See, the solution didn't come from one of the giants you might guess. It actually came from the engineering team at LinkedIn. They were staring this problem right in the face. They needed a lifeboat, and what they ended up building became the bedrock for a whole new generation of the internet. And the key to this whole revolution, it starts with something you might think sounds kind of boring: log files. But as we're about to see, just rethinking what a simple log could be, well, that was the stroke of genius that changed absolutely everything. So first, let's really get our heads around this data deluge. What was this new flood of information, and why was it suddenly so incredibly important? Log data used to just be for system admins, right? Something you'd look at to figure out if a server crashed. But by 2011, it was the actual lifeblood of the internet. Every click, every like, every single search query. This stuff wasn't just for looking at later anymore. It was being used in real time to power the core features of a website, from recommendations to security. And this created a massive problem. The data was absolutely essential, but the systems that were supposed to handle it were completely broken. They just weren't built for this new real-time world. So if you were an engineer back then, you were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You had 2 bad choices. On one hand, you had these big enterprise messaging systems. Sure, they were reliable, but they were also bloated with a ton of features you didn't need for logs, and man, were they slow. On the other hand, you had log aggregators. They could handle a lot of data, but they were built for offline jobs, not the instant, real-time processing that a site like LinkedIn desperately needed. So the LinkedIn team came up with this, honestly, a radical new idea. It was so elegant and so simple. What if the log wasn't just a file anymore? What if the log was the central nervous system for the entire data pipeline? Now, what's really cool is how they redefined what a log is. Forget about complicated databases. Just picture a book where you can only add new pages at the very end. That's it. It's an ordered, unchangeable list of things that happened. This simple, powerful idea is the absolute heart of Kafka. And that simplicity, that's the secret to its incredible speed. The systems that send data, we call them producers, they don't have to do any complex thinking. They just add their message to the end of the log. No complex writes, no indexing, just append, and simple is fast. Okay, so this log in the middle is managed by servers called brokers. The systems that write data to it are producers, and the systems that read data from it are called consumers. And this setup is really key because the producers and consumers never even have to know about each other. They only talk to the log in the middle. But it's not just the big picture design. Kafka's real magic comes from a few really unconventional ideas, its secret sauce, if you will, that make it totally different from anything that came before it. Okay, so secret number 1 is completely counterintuitive. In most systems like this, the central server does all the heavy lifting. It keeps track of every message, who's read it, what's been delivered. Kafka flips that whole idea right on its head. The central server, the broker, is intentionally kind of dumb. Here's the crucial part. The broker doesn't waste any time or energy tracking what's been read. That whole responsibility gets pushed out to the client, the consumer. Each consumer just has to remember its own position in the log, kind of like a bookmark in that book we talked about, and that little shift makes the broker incredibly lightweight and easy to scale. And this whole dumb broker, smart consumer model, it unlocks a genuine superpower for developers. The ability to travel through time. Listen to this quote from the original paper. Because the consumer is in charge of its own position, it can just decide to go back to an earlier point in the log and reread everything. Did you find a bug in your code? No problem. Fix the bug, rewind your consumer, and just reprocess all the data correctly. This was an absolute game changer. All right, Kafka's second secret gives it what you can really only describe as an unfair performance advantage. And it does this by basically breaking the rules and letting the computer's operating system do all the hard work. See, normally, when you want to get data from a file and send it over the network, it involves a bunch of really inefficient steps. First, the data is read from the disk into the OS cache. Then it's copied from there into your application. Then your application has to copy it back to the OS into a different buffer before it finally gets sent out. That's a lot of extra work. Kafka cleverly just bypasses all of that. It uses one simple command that basically tells the operating system, hey, you see that data in your cache? Send it straight to the network for me. This one-step process gets rid of all that expensive copying, and you get a massive boost in performance. Now, all this theory sounds great, but the proof is in the performance. Let's see what happened when the Kafka team actually benchmarked their invention against the big systems of the day. So the team put Kafka head-to-head with two really popular messaging systems at the time, ActiveMQ and RabbitMQ. So how much of a difference did all these clever design choices actually make? Yeah, the results were staggering. Seriously, on this chart showing how fast you can write data, that red line way up at the top, that's Kafka. It's not just a little bit faster, it's pushing over 400,000 messages a second and totally maxing out the network. And the other two systems, they're those flat lines way down at the bottom. And it's the exact same story on the other side for reading data. Kafka could consume messages more than 4 times faster than its rivals. This design wasn't just elegant, it was brutally effective. They had finally built a system that could keep up with the internet's data deluge. And the impact of this invention went way, way beyond just LinkedIn. Kafka wasn't just their lifeboat, it became the engine for a whole new real-time revolution across the web. So why does all this matter to you? Well, because Kafka and the ideas it brought to the table now power countless features you use every single day. From the personalized recommendations you see, to the ad systems that basically fund the web, to the security systems that can detect fraud in milliseconds, thousands and thousands of companies have built their entire businesses on this foundation. You know, the story of Kafka is just this powerful reminder that sometimes the most elegant and powerful solution is actually the simplest one. In a world where our technology just keeps getting more and more complex, it really makes you wonder, what's the next huge problem that's going to be solved not by adding more features, but by taking them away?